That sounds good to me. I think we could start recording, although, I mean, we could do it when we call the meeting to order because it might be a few
That
minutes.
too. Okay, sounds
I can
good.
remind
I'll wait.
you.
Oh, please, I have a big
A big
reminder.
sign.
I was gonna tape it to the screen. Okay.
That's well, I can tell you it's the entire answer. We still have to like,
Yeah, no.
there's still, you know, permitting and zoning stuff. But I think that, but like, as far as something, moves the needle on like the value, you know, how the water mold that value, you know, based on the, you know, capitalized stream of
Hello, how are
net operating income, like
you?
it changes net operating income significantly.
Georgina, yes, Georgina, yes.
Gap, which shows you what a big gap it is. But a lot of developers.
Have a seat. I'm actually right here, but I'm leaving.
Less than still making up.
Oh, I realized.
Pretty big size. If the problem is it doesn't pencil out, you should just keep clicking away regulations and any cost you can until it does.
I think we have, I think.
Great,
I think
okay.
there's a fear though.
And
there is a
Jennifer
fear that-
Clark, welcome, and Branwood. Yeah, it's Branwood. Thank you. Oops.
Hey, Marie.
Yes, Austin.
I was just trying to let Branwen and Jennifer Clark in, and it wouldn't let me. So I
Oh.
wonder if I have the ability to do that. But if you're gonna leave, we should probably
Yeah.
sort that out just so I can let people in if members of the
Exactly.
public join.
Yeah. And
This is Tamaya. I can
Hi.
let people in because
Oh,
I'm
you
on
can.
because I'm a muni
Oh,
person,
great.
so I can let people in if needed.
Perfect.
Thank you, Tamara.
Yes. Great, thank you. And Nolan, were you still gonna leave?
No, I.
Oh, good, because, all right, yes, because the BAC was canceled.
It simplified things greatly for me today.
And I am leaving, so I'll leave you with the thing just in case.
Yeah,
tonight.
I can take the controls back, yeah.
Yes, perfect.
Yeah.
And thank you. And all the materials are there, op-ed minutes, agenda, and the petition description. You have that. Lunch is coming. I'll leave it here. And let's see, just a short announcement for the lunch. When it comes, I'm going to put it here. We're going with Urban Greens today, and you know, they write the name of the sandwich, but in case you want to know what mystery meat you have. It's right here. So. Great. Oh, did we have somebody else we haven't welcomed? No, I think we're good.
Hello.
Oh,
Can everyone
Jessica's
hear me?
here too. Yes, good morning. Can you
Morning.
hear us?
Had some trouble. Yes, I had a little bit of trouble joining, but
Mhm.
worked
Oh,
now.
no. Great, glad you're here.
do we have most everybody here then?
I think so. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is Trevor. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
If you're
So are we
missing,
ready to?
say so. Oh, ready to record?
You want to start?
Yuppers.
Okay.
Oh, no worries. Sorry. Yeah, that was my,
Start off officially at 2:19.
yeah,
It's already been recorded.
yeah, okay. Oh. Gotcha. Not to. All right. Let me know if you need. Text me.
Thanks everybody for coming. I'm filling in for Trevor. But the first thing we'll do is we'll just make sure everybody's here because I can't see everybody in person. You look kind of tiny. So Trevor's not here because he's on sabbatical. I see Branwyn. Is Kevin?
I'm here. Yes.
Thanks. And Khalil?
Yeah, hi.
Okay. Isabel?
Yeah, here.
And I see Mildred. And Jesse?
Yes.
And Austin's here as well. So I think everybody's here and we have a couple of people extra as well. there anybody else that we need to note on attendance or anything like that?
I'll mention that I'm here, Jessica Willoughby. I'm an assistant municipal attorney.
Okay, so Austin sent out the agenda. And so the first part is to just look that over and see if there's anything that we need to change, add. And then if somebody can make a motion to approve the agenda.
I just like to point out that my name's misspelled, my last name, so it should be an E instead of a C. But other than that,
Who is that speaking? Sorry, I just can't see your face.
hi, me, Georgina, Isabel.
Oh, Georgina. Okay, sorry,
Yeah.
it's hard. You guys are so small.
Oh.
Your last name or your first name?
My last name, so it's written as Brock, but it's Broek, not CK.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Thank you.
No worries, no worries. Yeah.
Sorry about that. So does somebody want to make a motion to approve the agenda then?
Motion to approve. Second, by Khalil.
And who approved, who
Second.
made the motion?
Jesse?
Okay.
And Cleo was second.
Yes.
Okay. And then we also have the minutes from December.
And Jessica, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm sure it's fine, but we should just make sure there's no objection
It's-
and that,
Okay.
Yeah.
So do we just have to be, if anybody's opposed then?
yeah, you could
Okay.
just ask. Yeah, I could pass without objection, I think.
Anybody in opposition of approving the agenda as is? Okay, see all good signs. That we'll go with the agenda the way it is. And then just correct the spelling.
I will.
Thanks. And then we have the minutes from December. Austin's notes. Anybody want to make a motion to approve those?
Motion by Khalil. And second by Jesse. Yeah. With the
Anybody
same,
opposed to approving the minutes as they were? Okay, I think those go ahead and pass. And then the next thing on here is the public comments. So I know we have a couple of guests. We have a small amount of time. Was there anybody that wanted to do a public comment? Let's see, guests, and then we can divide the time that we have on the agenda between the people. I don't know if anybody's in the room either.
we're not seeing anyone raise their hand.
Okay, so maybe they're just here to listen then, more of a listening capacity. So then we don't have anything under unfinished business. But the new business we have, the first part is just general updates, and I'll hand that over to Austin.
Sure. Just seeing in the chat. Thanks, everyone. Just here listening. Glad to have you guys here. I just want to quickly report out on the AML talk on December 12th. It was went really well. There were about 50 guests there, I think, from all over the state. And I was speaking, and then the city and borough of Juneau folks were speaking about their program, and there were lots of questions and lots of interest by local jurisdictions on how they could move forward and see some progress in childcare and early ed. So it was really great. I also spoke with Jeanette Lee, who is a new program officer at Rasmussen Foundation, and she was hired recently, and part of her portfolio is going to include childcare. So I think that's a little new for them and exciting for us. And I spoke with her there, and we've connected since on ways that we can continue to engage with them as well. That's it.
Thank you, Austin. And was there any updates from any of the other members from out in the community? The next part on the agenda is about the ACE Fund Executive Director.
I can give an overview and then turn it
Sure.
over to Nolan and Jesse and Khalil if that works, Jessica. Yeah.
Perfect.
So thanks to everyone who worked on this. The committee has been pretty busy. Jesse took a stab at doing the first draft of the position description, which was super helpful. The hardest thing is always drafting something, so that was great. And then Nolan made a bunch of great edits, and so did Khalil, and we ended up with what we sent around to you. And so we wanted to spend some time to just go through that. Nolan's going to walk us through it today, and then he'll talk a little bit about the process, and so will Jesse moving forward. And I think we're ready to finalize it today. Our hope is to share it with you. If there's any feedback, make those changes, but then forward it along to HR and consider it ready from the board's perspective. So go ahead, Nolan.
Yes, thanks, Austin. The position description you should have in your materials. It's this PDF, this like very Muni styled PDF. What I did with the position description, piece that I think that the others had started and great, and I really appreciate the work that everybody put into making this a really thoughtful thing. I added a few pieces to it, through our kind of editing process. I mainly like language about, kind of contextualizing the position within the municipality. But the way that this works is this position, and I shared this in the last meeting, but kind of by way of a reminder on a few things, that this board opted last time not to follow the process of like a typical Muni HR recruitment where we would be posting the position and follow along with a Muni, you have all of the Muni recruitment with competitive applications and scoring criteria and stuff like that. This position, it does have the ability to be a direct appoint position. And that was what the board chose to pursue. So and again, this is a position that answers to the board, to this board, is fully serves at the pleasure of this board. This is actually a very interesting thing in terms of Muni code. The charter language and Muni code are very, very, very clear about this, that this position reports to this board. And there are a few other positions within the municipality where there's a position that reports to a board like the Equal Rights Commission, but this one has even stronger language where with the AERC position, it's actually confirmed by the mayor, appointed by the board. And this one, it's only consultation with the mayor. So we do not have a role in saying yes or no to your recruitment process, your hires, and those personnel decisions that affect that board. So just to be clear, this board has very strong authority over that position. It does still have to follow a lot of other HR processes and systems as a municipal position. So it does have to have a position description that meets the Muni criteria. So what we've got drafted here is something that we will submit to HR once this group fully blesses it, and it's going to take the estimate from the HR director. Is that it probably would take about 30 days for the classification to be fully vetted and evaluated and approved, and there is and it's actually that timeline. He expects it to go up a little bit with some other work that's going on throughout the municipality. So getting it in fairly quickly is probably a high priority to get that done. Normally, when you submit the position description for approval, they actually assign a grade to it, that determines the pay level. But this one is a little bit different in that the classification as far as pay goes is already determined in code. So we already know what the pay grade is, that 22E, and we talked about this earlier, but the range on it is in the not remembering the exact figures, but it's this huge range between $60,000 and $140,000 per year. So you guys have the determination about somewhere. I think that generous range gives us, somewhere in there is the right number, but you guys are the ones who can kind of determine that. So once this is approved by HR, then this body can do the type of recruitment process that you want. Direct appointment means you don't have a ton of strings on it, but it sounded like there was nonetheless a desire for a competitive recruitment. And so if some of our preliminary talks that we've had on the group that chosen as the hiring committee, we're thinking something like another the recruitment might last for something like another, did we say something like 30 days? So if this was approved mid-February, for recruitment to begin mid-February, we'd probably be looking at something like mid-March to have all of the applications, and then several weeks or a few weeks worth of interviews or selection type process, which would then put us, probably whoever gets selected is probably going to need to give notice to a current employer, or very likely to. And so bottom line is that it's very likely, we're talking May before someone's on board. It'd be great to have it in April. But that's probably roughly the timeline that we're looking at. I don't know, Khalil, Austin, Jessica, anyone else wants to add anything to what I just said about that?
Yeah, we were just hoping to have interviews in late March, early April, and so that we can bring to that April 3rd meeting. So that we can get approval then. If not, then we might have to have a special session of sorts, right?
And I'll just add that we didn't anticipate that HR had to classify the position since it already had the grade assigned. And so this is a delay from what we expected. We hope to be able to finalize today and then get it out in the community, but it looks like we're going to be a month ish behind the schedule. So yeah, the way we calculated it, and I know Jesse took notes on that too, and is ED coming on sometime in May. And then I think one thing we should think about is and we can talk, Nolan's going to go through the position description, but we should talk about within that salary range, if the board wants to narrow that range and specifically say a range that is different now within it, of course. That's a big range, so you might get a variety of applicants and depending on what you're looking for. So that could be something we talk about today. And we figured, this is a very sort of formal looking document. It's for HR, but we will take all this content, and actually Nolan's already put most of it in a Word document too. We have a bunch of documents we've been working with. We'll put it out in an easier way for people to receive right in the community that don't need this weird HR document. And we thought we would ask for a resume, cover letter, and 3 references along with putting this out. So if there are thoughts about how to do that, I don't know if now is the right time. We could go through the position description first, but we wanted to talk with you all about that too. Do you want to run through the position description a little, Nolan, or did folks have a chance to read it? And do you want to have any thoughts or feedback?
I am happy to run through it, but if that's what the group wants.
That'd be great.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah, so this is the functions, you have the kind of headings of each that has the bullet points of like some of the specifics below that. And then there's a percentage assigned to each of those groupings, like probably all seen position descriptions that, follow some kind of a similar format. But 30% of the position is the leadership and strategic direction. And so that's the high level, working with the board, with this board, executing strategic vision and plan, being an advisor to this board, as well as to the board assembly. Also the Anchorage School District, to the extent that can open up, good lines of collaboration with the school district. There's language about ASD that's included. I think I can't remember if it's either in charter and code related to this position. Being a representative of the ACE fund in the community and being an advocate for early childhood education. So forth. Program and operations development. This is, overseeing implementation and management of those programs, working with the municipal departments that are going to be, have roles in administering this funding. Health department's probably a key one, but, going through with purchasing, mayor's office, other departments to administer and run programs, monitor the outcomes, collect data, evaluate progress, all of that type of stuff. So that's the program operations management. Fundraising, financial stewardship is, overseeing the use of those funds and, making sure that money is spent appropriately. And also looking at funding opportunities, ways to leverage the ACE funding, pursuing other types of funding to maximize the impact. Then board and staff collaboration, that's the kind of like liaison functions to the ACE fund board, supporting the board and its governance responsibilities. This position is probably going to be the one who's kind of organizing these meetings, for instance, and doing a lot of that work. And eventually if there's, staff under the ACE board ED, that they would be supervising that staff as well, should add. And then the community engagement and advocacy piece, the kind of external facing role of being an advocate for early education and childcare in the city. So those are kind of the main functions there. Yeah, I don't know, whatever comments you guys have or questions that we can try to answer.
Thank you, Nolan. Are there any like general concerns about the description as it is, or any comments or additions? Is the description, approving it and getting it to HR something that once our discussion is done, that we need to take a vote on to approve it as is and send it to HR?
I think that would be a good idea. It's probably not necessary, but doesn't hurt.
And one thing maybe I should add real quick too is that I'm I'm new to the Muni as far as how these processes go. So there may be some extent to which what's written here, HR says it needs to be changed, or we need to add specifics in this way, and that may be forthcoming. So I just want to give folks a heads up that that would be, of course, like procedural, specific administrative type stuff, not changing the substance of what has been provided. But
Just a quick question. Is there any reason to add in other duties as assigned to this?
Covering one's butt, that could be that could be added.
Yes, I have a question on the range, and if we wanted to narrow that, I feel we should. I don't know how we go about deciding that.
When you say that we should narrow it, what are your initial thoughts on what that might be?
I guess if we are asking for at least 5 years of leadership experience in early childhood or nonprofit management, a bachelor's and master's degree preferred, I think 62 is a little on the low end. Maybe jumping it up to about 85 or
I agree.
making it a competitive.
I would agree
Is
too.
this,
And I think
is this a permanent position?
This is yes. This is yes. I don't know if that has like a precise HR definition, but it's not some kind of a temporary position.
I would assume, Nolan,
When-
that it's at will. So, I mean, it's appointed position. So the board could terminate the person's employment, but it is meant to be permanent unless that happens, right? It's not like a term position or something.
So it's not going to be for a certain amount of time, and then they have to be reapproved by the board.
Yeah.
I agree with narrowing the range. I think this is a situation where we get what we pay for. Have we had a chance to look at, say, stuff from 4Acre or elsewhere to get an idea of what the sector is paying an executive director? Similar qualifications?
Need to do.
I see Tamaya has hand up.
I was just gonna say that you may want to look at other muni positions that have more narrow ranges that require similar experience as well. So our non-executive positions have much narrower pay scales. And you could look at some of those that require similar type of experience to sort of see like what is the lowest level that we typically pay those individuals at the municipality.
I could look into muni position comps. I could work with HR on that piece.
Like the ERC for rights. That executive director position might be interesting to know what the range was.
I have
Yes.
a question. If we don't narrow the range today, though, does that delay us getting it to HR?
No, what I would suggest on it honestly is if we have more homework to do on the range, I don't think that's a thing that needs to hold up us submitting this to HR. So that could be revisited at a future meeting and maybe just a suggestion. Maybe we could come back with more data.
I also think that it's possible, and the board will have to decide its comfort level with this, but we have a lot of work that's going to be happening in committees. And so I would suggest if the board's comfortable that the committee, Nolan work to look internally at HR, Khalil and Jesse, and Trevor will be back, but he's on sabbatical, but are part of that committee, and they could suggest like a larger range. So there's room for the board to determine the final salary, but that they kind of narrow that range down to something they find that is appropriate after some research. Just so it doesn't, I don't know that every decision like that has to come back to the full board unless you want it to, but it does kind of slow things down.
So I guess often with that, would you suggest, I'm hearing that the committee can agree to whatever that range is, but are we now saying that, yes, we agree it should be refined? Is that something that we need to agree on? Makes sense.
So what I heard was that we want to add maybe like other duties as assigned, and that we want to narrow the range, but we want to do some more research and kind of rely on the committee that's doing the work of hiring the executive director. But was there anything else that we want to add to it, or? Hearing none, are we ready to maybe like we could by a show of thumbs or say if anybody's in favor of just sending this off to HR with the addition? I don't know if I've ever seen a job description that didn't have other duties as assigned.
Yeah.
So if you're in favor of sending that to HR, if you want to just like indicate that by aye or
Aye.
anybody opposed? Oh, Branwen, do you have your hand up or is that in favor? Okay.
Sorry, I was trying to thumbs up. I pressed the wrong button.
Okay, no worries. No one opposed? Okay, thank you for all the hard work on the job description. Drafting it definitely is the hardest part. And then I think the next thing on here is about where to advertise, and Jesse was going to take that piece.
Yeah, Jesse was actually going to talk about the timeline. Nolan did a bit, but if you want to go through it a bit more, Jesse, and then talk about the overlap with contractor and ED, that might be useful.
Yeah. So we had talked about, because it needs to go to HR for 30 days, we would probably post the position by mid-February and keep that position posted until about mid-March. Our hope is to have interviews scheduled for late March. And we said early April, but our next meeting is April 3rd. So in order to say early April, it'd be the 1st or 2nd to get it done before that meeting. There's a chance we won't have interviews done by that April 3rd date. If we are able to, we would bring our suggestions to the board in that April 3rd meeting. And then we would be able to offer the position knowing that somebody will probably need to do their notice of a couple weeks. And then we're looking at that end of April, early May. And with our contractor extension, I guess we have a piece where we're kind of trying to finesse.
Well, yeah, I think the motion from our first meeting was the intent was to have overlap. And so we said, 1 to 2 months of overlap between the contractor and the executive director, given that Austin has a lot of expertise and kind of shepherded the process through the implementation team. And so I think there's consensus from staff and from the committee that we'd like to stick to that plan to have overlap. And so
And in our early discussions, we said 1 to 2 months. As it is right now, it might be only about a month. So we are hoping to then extend that again for the overlap if needed with our contractor.
And it sounds like, and Nolan can correct me if I have the dates wrong, but I think that the contract is supposed to be on the January 21st agenda for the assembly to get approval, and then that would I assume it'll go smoothly, that would be approved through April. And so even if everything went with no hiccups for the hiring process, which in my experience, things sometimes take longer than we expect. So obviously we'd like to have someone coming in May, then we would not have the overlap that was intended from the motion. So I think that we would like to find a way to plan ahead to make sure that there is overlap. So I mean, does an extension, so we'll get the approval through April, for January through April, right? And then does it make sense, as you had mentioned, to try to go to the assembly for an extension for potentially May and June to have that overlap?
So yes, that is something that we can do. And I think that the timing of like going through April is cutting it close as far as getting a good period of overlap, right? So that is something that we can do.
And then what's a good time? I mean, so in terms of planning ahead to request that extension, is March a good time to kind of pencil it in to be going to the assembly for requesting the May, June extension?
That's probably correct. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that is.
Is there any reason why we wouldn't request it upfront? Is there any reason we wouldn't say on this, the 21st, say, because of the timeline and the 30 days through HR and the hiring process, the board had already voted for an overlap. Can we go ahead and do the extension for May, June? That way we don't have to go back through another process.
Yeah, and the reason that we're not doing that is mostly because we don't, it's in the queue and has been approved through
Okay.
a very painful process that we do not want to reopen.
Okay.
And that's it. So that's the main reason, is that we don't want to expose us to like a further delay. We poured our heart out to Austin yesterday, and we feel really badly about the hiccups that have gone on with that process. And we're trying to make it as smooth as we can.
Okay.
We're learning our lessons.
So, and what I'm hearing is March, we can ask for that extension for May and June. When would we need to have that ready? Or would that be something that we just talk about in our February meeting for you to bring?
We could certainly talk about it. I mean, it's something that has to be, that we have to, initiate through the mayor's office at the present time. We can, if it's something we want to have on the agenda for February, that would probably be a good thing.
But just so I understand, I mean, we probably don't need a formal board action since we had already done that motion, but maybe just like an update or check in February.
Yes, that would probably be good. Yeah, the formal board action, if you want, I mean, that's certainly a communication channel that you guys have, at your disposal. But we do get the message in other ways too.
Sure. Thanks for all your navigation and both on the executive director and HR and all of those processes, as well as getting through the assembly and process. We appreciate all your hard work.
Sure. Thanks for your patience with us on it.
So just so I'm clear, I think that there was a motion for 1 to 2 months overlap in October, which the board made. Nolan, it doesn't sound like the mayor's office needs anything formal again, but we can just make notes that there was this discussion, and does that sound right to everyone, or do I need to do anything else? Yeah, someone mentioned putting it on the agenda in February. It sounds like you've discussed it, but I'm happy to do that if that is what you want. I could put it on the agenda as an update in March, like what is the plan since you guys discussed March, or I'm just trying to make sure I'm doing the right thing.
I'm good with that unless you think we need to anything else formal. I mean, I think the motion covers it. So as long as we're all have a consensus, then just move forward as you planned.
Yeah, March update would be good.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
You're going to be our bureaucratic wizard.
And there's also advertising the position.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we had
Go ahead, Jess.
Do you want me to take that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
so
ahead.
we had talked about where we might advertise. And so we can do, of course, different muni sites, Thread, ACT, possibly ASD. I'm wondering if anyone on the board has other suggestions on where we might want to have outreach for this position.
Just to start it off, while you guys were thinking, I could say that while we did a lot of the things that we shared while I was supporting the implementation team, and Jessica and Branwyn will remember this, but we had Thread share things on social media. I think a lot of people go to Thread into the Alaska Children's Trust to get information about what's going on in this sector and the community. So I think we could definitely ask those partners to share. If there are other partner organizations, please send those ideas to me. You can give ideas now and I'll take notes, but also we have, a month or so until we can post this. So I guess what I would ask is if people have ideas to send those to me beyond what we've done in the past. We had a long list of where we put flyers for our conversations. We did actually sponsored content for some of the events, which I don't think we necessarily need to do here, but I do have a good list of starting places to advertise, but definitely open to hearing more.
Is this something we could advertise with like 4acre, or since it's not really,
Yeah. I think that's a good
would they
idea.
advertise it for us?
No, not in the past, but I think we should I can look into that. Seems like a perfect fit.
Are we thinking this search is focused in Anchorage, or is this national? Is this regional? Is this Alaska wide?
I think we haven't had that discussion, but, or at least I haven't, but now that you mention it, I think regional would be a good thing to add on if, just in case. I mean, obviously Alaska relationships, I think, are also valuable. So I had kind of been thinking of Alaska focused because of, the partnerships that already exist, but I think it doesn't hurt to go regional unless, I don't know, what do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think kind of the same thought. The Alaska relationships are going to be big, especially given the job duties. But then there's such a larger talent pool too if we include Seattle.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I like the idea of regional just because to have someone that is in the city, cares about the city, knows how the city functions, makes sense. But if we can't find someone here, then it makes sense to open it up other places.
One thing I'll throw out if I could just offer one thought is that a statewide search, if there are probably a lot of really smart people, I think that are really knowledgeable in relevant areas that are in the in kind of the tribal health and social services realm at a lot of those organizations. And so that might be one advantage to making it more of a statewide search too.
Yeah, definitely statewide.
At least, yeah.
So that's great. I think I'm assuming that I'll be in charge of sort of trying to get this out and get word out. So I'll need all of your support for organizations. And I mean, I'll talk with Forker, but how do you do a statewide search? How do I post things in Seattle if you want them there? I think you said, Kevin, you want to include that in our region. So I'll just need help from you guys on thinking through how to make sure we get it out as far as we can.
And I'll offer too that I can look into what kind of muni channels might be available too. Like, I mean, like for one easy one, the mayor's office has an email distribution. It'd be easy for us to put that in there. But I think there are other kinds of outreach platforms that we could tap into that I'm just not aware of right now.
Thanks, Nolan.
But then there are also some things that are very expensive, like
Yeah.
Indeed,
Yeah, so I guess that's a question, like even with Forker, I assume that that's free, but I don't know. If there's a cost to post, Marie and Nolan, you'll know more about. I mean, there is money available, right, in the ACE fund, and the board can spend up to 10% annually on administration, and that was so that would include my contract, for instance, and the ED once the person comes, but also could include something like this, I think. But I don't know, Nolan and Marie, how there was some funding in the contract for me that was meant just for board costs, and that's how we were paying for lunch and things in the past. I don't know how that works in 2025. So do you have any sense for the board, how easy it is to access those funds?
I can look into that. I don't know the exact answer, but I mean, you're right, though. There's a budget for it. And so I think seems to me like a perfectly, viable expense and not even a particularly big one. So I can look into how we might pay for some advertising.
Okay.
Because that may make sense. LinkedIn's another, good venue that charges more for getting a bigger boost.
So if folks have, any additional places that they think of to advertise, can they send those your way often?
Yeah, please, that would be great. And I think we'll have an opportunity at the next board meeting, potentially, if I have questions or sort of as we're getting ready to post it, we could talk through some of these details, but it would be helpful to be thinking about it in advance so I can set things up if there are specific sites people want this on. So please give me your ideas.
And have we started drafting like the interview questions and how we want that process to look?
Yeah, the hiring committee drafted a bunch of interview questions and I sent those around. Because the Open Meetings Act, we can talk about it here, or you could email just me. I didn't want you guys emailing the committee members because we can't have more than 3 people working on something that is part of a package of something we're going to approve. So go ahead and read through those. We could talk about them now, but we have a little time, I think, for that. Probably wouldn't happen until March. But let me know if you see something on there that doesn't look good or something that you particularly like, or if you have additions.
Is there anything else under this agenda item around hiring the executive director that we haven't covered yet? Are there any questions before we move on?
Just looking at my notes. What do you think, Nolan, Jesse, Khalil? Oh, I have one more thing. Jessica, did you guys, Jesse, Nolan, Khalil? I don't want to butt in. I keep talking. If you have more things.
No, you're good.
Okay. I have been in touch with the Muni Attorney's Office and Jessica, who's here. Thanks, Jessica, for coming to this meeting to ask them how this process will work. So for instance, this position description discussion, we talked about whether that should be an open session like it is, and they advised us that it should. I think it's good that it was. So thanks, Jessica, good advice. But I think that once you get to a point where, assuming the committee is doing interviews, I'm assuming that's kind of how this is going to go, but it's your process. So tell us if you think differently. But once you got to, say you had 2 finalists, or you even just had one person that you wanted the full board to approve authorize hiring that executive director, I would think you would want to do that in an executive session. Say there were 2 people. I don't know. I don't know that it's comfortable for people to be having that evaluation done in public. That said, Jessica has reminded me that some positions are done in public like that. And so maybe, Jessica, I don't know if you have an answer yet. We have a little time to figure that out. We're not to that point, but do you have any thoughts on how that process might go for the full board?
Right. So Jessica Willoughby, I'm an assistant municipal attorney. Can everyone hear me on the line?
Yeah.
Okay. My voice is not a naturally loud one, so I will do my best. If you can't hear me, just chime in.
You sound great.
So, Austin, thank you for the question. I think the Open Meetings Act, it's in one section of Alaska statute, and it is super dense, right? It, as a board, as a municipality, of course, the ACE fund falls under the jurisdiction of the Open Meetings Act. I think we talked about it before. We also have our own open meetings code and municipal code. And the Open Meetings Act offers exceptions for boards where their meeting doesn't have to be open in the meeting. And those are either exceptions full on, like if you guys went to a training, for example, where you weren't conducting municipal business, that might be an exception. And then there's specific exceptions for subjects that can be considered in executive session. And the municipality has adopted these exceptions, 3 of the exceptions, under our municipal code. So arguably, the exceptions that apply to a board are more narrow than what's offered by the state. Okay, so does that make sense? So the state has 4 exceptions, boards and commissions in Title IV. The municipalities adopted 3 of them. The first relates to matters which affect the finances. The second relate, I think, which may be applicable here, subjects that tend to prejudice the reputation and character of any person. And 3 matters by which are required by law to be confidential. Just positing myself, I'm here as a resource. I don't make a decision for the board as to how to apply the Open Meetings Act, but I can offer my perspective. Austin is right. There are boards and bodies in the municipality and statewide that do interviews in open meetings. I can think of Sitka as an example. They recently hired a municipal attorney and they did interviews at open meetings this past summer, first interview, second interviews. And then I think they had the conversation where they made the decision in executive session, but I'm not 100% sure about that. Like Austin said, I'll do a little bit more research and see if I can figure that out. Because it's not often that it happens. Obviously, most personnel decisions for the municipality are made by HR behind closed doors. But the courts have, when issues like these come up, have time and again emphasized the importance of the public process, whether it's through the Open Meetings Act or Act. So in my mind, an interview is most likely something that can be done in public. There may be specific instances where the conversation goes in a direction where the interviewee might kind of red flag and say, this is something I would discuss, but only in an executive session, in a closed session, because it relates to a medical issue or some other personal issue. So I think the interviews would be by and large public, and then the decision about which candidate to go forward to could also be done in the public. I think there arguably could be a case to make that in an executive session as well. No official action can happen in executive session. So the discussion could happen in executive session, then you come out of executive session and then make an official decision in the public meeting. Okay. So Austin, that's kind of just a broad overview, informational, how the Open Meetings Act would apply in this instance. I hope that's helpful. If you guys have specific questions, I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay, I think that you covered this in your presentation when we started, but just to make sure. So if there were interviews by a committee of 3, because of the number 3, then that committee does not trigger the open meetings.
Right.
But then if the board decided to do an additional interview, then that would trigger it. But if there are no formal interviews done by the full board and the committee just reports back, then interviews would end up being just in committee.
Right. Interviews would end up being in committee, and then it's, I'm thinking down to like the notes that you're going to take. Those might be public. In terms of, I've seen for HR hiring at the municipality, there's a list of questions and folks get answered and graded, and there's some confidentiality in those and sometimes that those are released. But I think that's going farther than your question. Yes, the again, with the density of the Open Meetings Act, they hide down in the definition section that a meeting is actually only when there are more than 3 members. So I think that would apply.
Thanks.
Thanks,
So the way
Jessica.
that we talked about, the hiring the executive director last time was to form the committee of 3, and then they would do the interviews, and they would present a single final candidate to the board, recommend for hire.
I thought the committee would maybe have leeway, if there were 1 or 2, or they're basically their finalists, that they could make a recommendation to the board at the board meeting.
So we may do like a final interview with any finalists in open board meeting.
I didn't think we had decided I think we were going to decide that depending on if it was necessary, or just have the discussion of the 1 or 2 finalists. I understood it.
More of a discussion than an individual interview.
Yeah, unless we decided whether that was necessary. I think our plan A was to bring the names and have a discussion. Unless the board wanted additional for that.
I think too, I agree with all of that, Khalil and Jesse and Jessica. I think we can see how it goes too, right? If you all interview and it's very clear there's one person that you think is the right fit, then that might be different than if there are several and you want the board's full feedback. So, Jessica Willoughby, I don't know if you sort of are assigned to us and are planning to, whether you want it to be or not, no, planning to help with these things over the next couple months, but that's the sense I got. So I think we can be in touch and figure out how to approach it.
I think of the Assembly's model, the mayor picks director level appointees, and then the Assembly usually has a work session where they don't do a like rigorous interview, but they at least have an opportunity to, in the open and public, go through the resumes usually submitted and just get to know the candidate in a kind of public space. So in my mind, that's a good model where there's initial conversations that happen in private mostly, and then an opportunity for a public meet and greet.
And that's when there's 1 candidate recommended?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I thought. It's a helpful example.
Yeah, I like that model.
It's very helpful to understand so we know what the options are, and as we get closer and find out who applies and how those interviews go. Was there anything else about this piece about hiring the executive director before we move on? Hearing none, the next part is about implementation of the ACE programs. And the first one was about the 2 RFPs for the subsidies and the stimulus. And I'll hand that over to Austin for an update.
Sounds great.
And Tamaya.
Oh yeah, and Tamaya's here too. Tamaya knows more about this than I do. So if there's any hard questions, she's going to answer them, but I can sort of run through some of the initial details. So as you know, the RFPs for the 2 initial programs, the employee subsidies, childcare sector employee subsidies, and the stimulus funding for operations are out. I think they went out on December 6th, around there. Tamaya and I participated with purchasing in a question session from possible applicants. So the way they do it is they have people who are thinking about maybe applying can join a session where everyone's there. So everyone has the benefit of hearing the answers and the questions. And so we answered some questions about the RFPs. And then Tamaya and I wrote with a little bit of support from some committee members added some response to questions to written questions. So that part is done, and Tamaya now, I think is it the 13th, the application period closes. And then do you want to talk a little bit about how, I mean, I could too, but I feel like this is really your thing. So what happens from there in the evaluation committee?
Yeah, so after the proposal deadline, we have some internal reviews that we have to do of proposals just to ensure that they kind of checked all the eligibility boxes. And then we'll verify that there's no conflicts of interest with our committee members. And then the committee members for the evaluation committee will receive those proposals and go through them and score them, a tentative score. And then we have a meeting scheduled on January 28th, where that evaluation committee will come together and we'll basically do the RFPs back to back in one meeting. The committee will discuss the proposals and finalize their scores and basically have from that meeting then their recommendation of who they would award the contract to, or the two different contracts to. Once we have that recommendation, we submit requests to negotiate with purchasing so that we can reach out to those contractors, talk to them about anything that maybe if there were outstanding questions from their proposal, things like we have to get certificates of insurance, so on. And then we put the recommendation of awards in front of the assembly. And so we are still aiming for that to go in front of the assembly, hopefully in February at one of those meetings, so that we can then have the contractors onboarded by the end of February or in early March. So that's kind of the process and where we're at with it. And then I know that those contractors will be working very closely with Austin and, getting input from the board.
Yeah, and the evaluation committee for those two RFPs is Khalil, Jessica Simonson. I guess I always think of Jessica Nessett as Jessie, but just to clarify, Jessica Simonson. And Trevor is an alternate. So, and then Tamaya will be part of that process too. And we'll keep you all posted on how that goes. I've already reached out. So before we formed an evaluation committee, or you formed an evaluation committee, the implementation committee, we had already picked these folks to evaluate RFPs. So those committees they're slightly different, who's evaluating and then who is there to discuss how to implement these programs, right? So, part of it is this evaluation group that's going to pick who the contractor is, but then there will be conversations with the contractor about, okay, here's this program. How do you plan to implement it? They'll probably want feedback from us. And Tamaya and I drafted the RFPs. So there was that opportunity for a lot of feedback and brainstorming with the implementation committee moving forward on how to actually play those programs out. There will be decisions to make, like we have a certain amount of funding. Do you want to focus on, these types of applicants? Or what if we have, too many applicants? How do we split up funding? Like, we'll expect the contractor to create a formula for all of that, but we did indicate in the RFPs that the board, and especially the implementation committee, and I would be, and probably Nolan too, to the extent he wants to be involved, would be giving support and ideas to that contractor. So they're not just out there on their own, because it ultimately is a muni program. So with that, we started thinking through, I reached out to the implementation committee, who you all selected last board meeting, Branwen, Kevin, and Jessica Simonson. And I reached out to that group to see if we should have an initial meeting at the end of January. We won't bring contractors on until probably early March, end of February, but wanted to start brainstorming. What does implementation maybe look like? What advice can we give? We've asked them to collect data because this sector is data poor. What does that mean? What kinds of data might they want to collect? And so I had emailed the group, but then we realized, and Branwen and I talked through it a little bit, that if Branwen works for an operation or for an organization and runs it that might be seeking funding either probably, I don't know, but it's possible she might apply for the operational assistance. And so we are trying to figure out, we want her feedback. We want to, she has a lot of experience in the sector, but don't want to put her in a position where there's any conflict from her applying. As of course, I think we brought this forward to Jessica Willoughby as well. Got a lot of Jessicas around here. But how could she avoid any conflicts? And I think we have a plan, which is just to have Branwen actually not serve on that committee. And instead, I could just reach out to her if I have questions specific to the sector, like how does this program work versus her being involved in making decisions about how the programs are implemented. Branwen Implementation Committee, do you all want to say anything different about that? I think that's kind of where we landed. The question is then, do we want a third committee member? I think we can cover that in a minute, but does that all sound right?
I think that sounds right
And
to me.
the implementation committee, this is the one where, we're helping advise the contractor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one of the
Yeah.
things I really wanted to weigh in on, which is why I asked to be on the committee without thinking about this problem, was that data collection piece. So I
Yep.
think I could just like email you guys some thoughts and not be in the meetings. And that seems like a good plan that we need.
That sounds great. And that is something I would definitely want to hear from you. So that sounds great to me. And it sounds like Kevin supports that idea, and Jessica, you were either nodding, or Jessica Simonson, I think, thinking that sounded good. Jessica Willoughby, did you have any thoughts on that? I kind of sent her about a 400-page email describing the situation, so.
That was good timing. I didn't actually get to respond to the 400-page email. No, I think you did a good job of outlining, because I'm kind of new to this board in terms of what your priorities are and the kind of the tiered approach to addressing them. I think you identified the conflict, and there's such an advantage to being able to identify something early on. So I thought that was fantastic and agreed with kind of your reasoning there. I just wanted to flag, and perhaps you've already had this conversation. We ask and receive for a lot of information from people, and I want to ensure when a agent as a municipality is asking for information from people, that the people submitting information clearly know what information that they are submitting is public information and what information is not public. So keep in mind when you're asking for proposals, if you're asking for data from folks, there are absolutely exceptions and instances where we can keep that information confidential, proprietary information, for example. But it behooves, putting some forethought and putting people on notice. It's already included in a lot of our language, so it might already be there. You might have already had this conversation. But things like these sort of proposals and grants are very interesting to the public, and folks love to see what other folks submitted. So it just, keeping that in mind as what you're asking for and the language you use that you ask can be really helpful later on.
That sounds great. Thank you for thinking of that. So you're thinking, so right now we're in a process where organizations hopefully will apply to be the contractor to administer these programs. I think when we're talking about data collection, we're talking about what that administration, like what that contractor might ask applicants to submit, either as part of an application or if they're awarded funding, how they used it, or, how many people needed it, those kinds of things. You're talking in that process, Jessica, that because it's a municipal program, even if they're submitting it to a non-municipal third party, that it could eventually be public. Is that what you're saying? Just so I make sure I understand.
Yes.
Okay, so just to make sure to have them have some sort of warning in their application process about that.
Yeah, and our grant applications usually have this sort of language, RFP, ITB. the newer processes, I think about the mayor's arts grants because of changeover, there's less institutional, how do I say this diplomatically? There's a little bit more turnover, so maybe our institutional knowledge doesn't run as deep. So sometimes that gets overlooked and people end up submitting a whole lot of information without clarity on what should be confidential and what is public.
Okay, great. That's a really good point. And I've actually been working even before the board came on board with a couple folks from the IT, on a list of ideas that things we might ask for, how should the programs be built. It's sort of the document that I use to create the RFPs and the goals in there. And so that I'll just keep notes on all of these things, and then implementation committee, when we meet, we'll talk about these things and then be ready to present whatever we need to the contractor once they're selected for each program. So right now we have Kevin and Jessica Simonson as an implementation committee. Did the board want to add a third member? Do you want to leave it that way? What do you think, Jessica?
So right now it's just two of us. And is Trevor on there as the alternative? Will he be back or no?
He's the alternate for the evaluation for the RP. I'm sorry, it's not the same people. It's just because in part, Kevin is a board member for Thread, so we didn't want him to be on the evaluation committee because we didn't want to put him similar to Mildred, right, in a position where there might be a conflict again. So this is a small sector. All of you are experts, and that's why we have, potential conflicts, but doing our best to navigate it. So anyway, yeah, implementation committee kind of March and beyond. We'll start work earlier than that, but bulk of the work will be working with a contractor. That's just you and Kevin. And I think, Kevin, if you don't mind, one question I'd also raised to Jessica Willoughby in the email was, I don't think there's any potential for Kevin to have any sort of conflict, because even though he's a board member on Thread, if Thread were to apply, I don't know that they will, but I'm just thinking about organizations that operate in this space. He wouldn't be selecting the organization. All he would be doing is working with an organization moving forward on developing programs. So I don't think there's any conflict in having him on the implementation committee. But if anyone, Jessica Willoughby, if you feel differently, please do let us know.
No, I didn't see anything.
I do think it'd be a good idea to have a third member though on the committee, just keeping that kind of thing in mind.
I think it's always helpful to have an odd number.
Yeah, I think it would be great. I mean, it's like you're gonna shape these programs. It's kind of a big deal too. So I think having more board feedback is great.
I would like to be in the committee, but I think there might be a potential conflict of interest because my mom would probably apply for one of those
Okay.
grants too. So yeah.
Thank you, Georgina. So is anyone else interested? So we have Mildred, but Mildred, we are gonna have Kevin. No, she's saying no. Oh, because the
I would
the
like to, but I'm sure that there will be a conflict of interest there, as we talked about.
yeah, I guess, yeah, I don't know what
With
I mean,
Kevin and I both being, I just don't know if that's gonna be a great idea.
yeah, I don't think there'll be a conflict because it would be post
Okay,
although there's one more question I want to ask, I think it's for Kevin and Mildred, is I don't think there's any problem with the initial two funds because the contractor will be selected and then it will just be about developing programs. So I think there's no issue. I do think that Kevin and Mildred, specifically you, Kevin, since you're now part of the implementation committee, you should maybe think about whether if the implementation committee also takes on the role of developing the pilot program, process, which I would recommend, so we can do all the, because that will also, we haven't talked about it yet, but probably be an RFP style process. And so I think it makes sense to have the same group working on those. If you think that your organization might apply for funding under the pilot project parameters, that could put you in a place where you might have a conflict. So we could talk a little bit more about that maybe once. I was going to talk about pilot projects next and how Tamaya and I have talked about and suggested we move forward.
Okay,
That'd be great. I'll think
Yeah.
through if there's a conflict there.
Okay,
yeah, me too.
great. Maybe I should do that, Jessica, now, and then we could circle back to the implement. Okay, great. So when we last met, Tamaya and I gave you a little information about pilot projects. So just as a reminder, there are three major programs in the 2025 ACE Fund budget. One is the sector employee subsidies, childcare subsidies. Then the second is the operational stimulus payments. Those are already in process, right? And then we have the third one, which is pilot projects. And this is sort of a different type of program because I think the way that we've talked about it, at least so far, and obviously it's all up to you guys, is that we might have multiple entities apply, and the language that we used, let me see, I think I put it in my document. When the IT put forward its suggested budget to do pilot projects, was that this would be quote, targeted funding that drives innovation and is intended to inspire confidence and further investment in the sector, ultimately increasing overall wages and supporting a more sustainable sector. So the idea is sort of this, like, let's put aside some funding for big ideas and for things that are new. And I think that last meeting, we decided that the board would play a role in making recommendations for funding under that category. It, of course, always ultimately has to be approved by the administration and the assembly, who determines the budget. But the process that Tamaya and I suggest is that, Tamaya, this would be an RFGP, right? Not RFP.
It might be an RFP if we want to make sure it's open to for-profit childcare
Okay, so
entities.
probably,
Yeah.
okay. So, and those are kind of just technical things for the health department, but so we would do an RFP like process. This is the suggested path, and you guys tell me if it sounds good. Tamaya, I could work on that in February, and Tamaya has already given me a sample of something I could write it from with the implementation team's support or committee support potentially to, and what we would do is describe the goals of the funding. And I think the committee could work to narrow those down and give some parameters for funding, and then ask, multiple applicants to suggest how they would use the funding and to come up with a big idea or, something innovative that they would like to do at their center. Or maybe it's not even a center. Maybe it's a nonprofit that's doing some program. I don't know. It could be anything. So we would put out this request for proposals, receive proposals back, much like the current process we're doing. The difference here being, rather than selecting one, contractor to administer a program or something, we might select multiple awardees. The board might select or recommend to the assembly and mayor multiple awardees for that funding. And so the role of the committee would be to help design that RFP-like document that went out, and then to help make a recommendation about who might receive those awards. I really have no idea how many applications or proposals we might get, right? It could just be a couple or it could be a lot, because we haven't really done something like this. It's pretty new. I think similar to how we've done the first two or are doing the first two, board members could serve on the evaluation committee. So ultimately coming up with a recommendation to then bring to the full board about which proposals should receive funding. So, and I've reached out to Jessica Willoughby about how the full board might evaluate that, if there's confidential information, et cetera, in the proposals, how they might make the full decision, and we have time to figure that out. But the timeline would be, working on that in February. I think getting it out sometime in February. I would recommend that the board not have to review the full document. First of all, there's a bunch of conflicts possibilities, right? Also, Open Meetings Act, we don't really want to put a draft out there, I think. So I think the committee should work on it with feedback from the board that you could send me if you have it. And then work with Tamaya to get it out in February. We were thinking then an evaluation would happen in April, and we would go to the assembly in May to ask for approval of those recommendations to be taken out of the ACE fund. And then funding would be released in the summer. One thing that Tamaya thought of, good point, and we've seen this with the alcohol tax, is to make sure that applicants know that that funding would need to be spent in 2025, even if they didn't get it till summer. But I think that that's okay, and I'm sure people could work within that. So I guess we can talk about what the board thinks about that process and timeline, and then talk sort of more specifically about who can serve on this committee with me, who is coming up with ideas and parameters and helping me. I've never shared the RFPs in the past with any board members because I didn't want there to ever be a conflict, but it's definitely helpful to have people have feedback and brainstorm with. So I guess first question is, does that seem like a good process? Well, I should say, Tamaya, you're the one who knows more about this process than me. So are there things you want to add? Did that sound correct? Any other thoughts you have?
I think that that does sound correct. The one thing I will say is that, however, if we take anything to the board before things are awarded, if it's a recommendation of award, we will have to do that in an executive committee because no information about the proposals can be public until we have an intent to award released.
Great. And that's probably laid out in code or something. So that would give Jessica probably the room to say, oh yeah, that makes sense to do an executive session. Sorry, guys, I'm also always taking notes, which then I produce. So it's like a little hard when you're talking all the time and taking notes, but so that's why there's some weird gaps here and there.
So the proposals for the pilot projects would be evaluated by a smaller committee and then recommendations would come to the board.
That's what I'm thinking. And so it would, I think in terms of conflicts, it would just be that, like Kevin, for instance, if an organization you're associated with, like Thread as a board member, we're planning to apply for pilot project funding, you would not want to participate in the shaping of that program, I think, much like we're talking about with Brandwin. So I didn't envision it being a nonprofit. I thought, oh, pilot projects, it's going to be like a center or someone starting a new organization, like something like that. But I don't actually know, and we haven't shaped it all yet. So I think it's a question of whether you want to talk with Thread about what they think about that, or if yeah.
I'm wondering how many conflicts also exist, with what could come in as a pilot project. Alaska is a small place and we all have lots of connections. And early childhood is important to, I think, most all of us. And so we have some sort of connection.
I mean, Jessica can speak more to this. It's okay to have a connection. It just can't be a specific, financial benefit or a specific, like Georgina identified, there's a family member who's applying. That's not, you don't want to be making decisions about that or weighing in on the program, but it's okay to generally be involved in the sector, to know people. I mean, I think that's okay. It's just where you, and Jessica, you can clarify for me if I'm not phrasing this well, but it has to be more specific than just being in the sector.
So I can go through what we screen for conflicts of interest with an RFP process. So it would be within the last 2 years that you served on the board, a committee, or other similar function for an organization, worked for them in any capacity or had a financial interest in, like if you were an investor, worked as a volunteer for them, received benefits or services from them, We do have other perceived conflict, but generally when people submit those, we can run them through purchasing. They'll make a determination. And then also if you have an immediate family member who has any of the above relationships. So it's really about if you have a financial interest, if you have directly volunteered for them, if you've received benefits or services within the past 2 years. And what happens is that you'll identify your conflict, you'll explain it, and then we send that to our purchasing department, and the purchasing director makes a determination as to whether or not there is in fact a conflict. And so one thing on that would be that if we took a recommendation to the full board, we would have to identify conflicts and have any board members recused from that meeting if they did have conflicts at that time.
That's really helpful, Tamaya. I'm wondering, Jessica Willoughby, I'm just thinking through, say there's a committee that didn't have any conflicts and they, are suggesting 3 awards, but 8 entities applied and half the board had some sort of relation to, right? I could see maybe Georgina's mom has applied or Branwen applied and Thread applied to run some innovative program. And all of a sudden we have half the board has applied. So they then shouldn't probably vote. Maybe they could vote on finalists if those weren't the finalists. But I'm just thinking through, how do you have quorum and how does the board make a decision? Is the decision just a majority of whichever board members can vote? Like, I don't want them to be in a position where they couldn't make a recommendation.
Right, and I'm most familiar with the conflict of interest statements within our code and not AHD's language. So Tamaya, can you share that conflict of interest language, 1 with the board entirely and 2 with me?
Yeah, and just to clarify, it's not AHDs, it's purchasing's. It's purchasing
Okay.
language. Yeah.
So we'll just have to think about how that works. But I think that specifically for this implementation committee, if you think that an entity that you work for or volunteer for, serve on a board for, receive benefits from, etc., might apply, it would probably be better not to have that person on the implementation committee, just in case.
I would have to double check, but I may have to step off that committee then.
I'm just looking at the list.
And Austin, I was thinking, can Alaska Children's Trust also, with Trevor, would they be eligible to apply for these monies as well?
I mean, it depends on how the program is defined, but I wouldn't imagine that ACT would apply for funding, is my guess.
Okay.
So we could ask Trevor that. I know, I was just looking at the list of board members.
I know.
So Jesse, so yeah, Trevor is a possibility. I think Jessica Simonson can check and see what Rural Cap's potential interest or might be. I think that Khalil.
So I was not thinking about Rural Cap, but I was thinking about serving on the board of Hillcrest Children's Center.
Oh, right. I forgot
and
about
that conflict. Yeah.
Okay.
And I
Great
received
point.
daycare services from Hillcrest, although I'm not on their board.
Yeah. That's true. This is going to get interesting.
She mentioned.
That was my initial concern, was then who can.
Yeah.
My list mentions receiving benefits or services. So if you look at that broadly, I pay the monthly.
Receive services.
Yeah. But I don't know if it means
To serve. Yeah.
what does that mean?
Depending on how broad that is, I have the the same conflict at a different center in town.
Right, everyone.
Yeah.
Right. And it's so hard to know, right? You don't know just because you're bringing your kids there, whether that center is going to apply for, I mean, that's a really hard, they don't know. They don't even know what the application looks like, right? So,
Probably don't know that yet, but.
Is there a way for
Yeah.
us to blind the applications from centers? Like remove the address and the name, so we don't know if it's ours or somebody else's?
Would that address the standards?
So
for
if we
purchase?
just review things blindly,
Maybe that's a question for purchasing, which we probably don't know today, but
mhm.
find out.
Yeah.
Worth checking.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Tamaya, do you mind, well, maybe you and Jessica together, and I can help too, but like trying to figure that out with purchasing, yeah,
This may be a
Yeah,
task for the implementation team for all the programs too, to figure out a way to have a blind application process.
yeah.
Yeah, I can run that by purchasing. It could be really difficult because we would have to screen the whole application for possible identifying information and their answers as well. So, but I can run that by purchasing to see if it's something they've ever, if it's something they allow.
I think I wanted to figure out who was going to be on this committee, and we had a plan to, with the initial committee, which we never met. I mean, I don't think there's any problem there, but to meet in a couple weeks before the February 6th meeting to come back with maybe some ideas on the pilot project. But I'm thinking we should hold off on that and probably not meet. And Tamaya and Jessica Willoughby and I can maybe do a little more brainstorming and thinking through this, and then come back for more discussion in February and maybe determine that committee then, because we'd still have several weeks to meet and talk before the contractor is selected for the first RFPs. What that does mean is that Tamaya and I might focus more on ourselves on writing that pilot project piece, because we don't have the conflicts. And so we'll just get started on that and then see how it goes, I think. I guess one question is, yeah, I don't think that we would be ready to put it out before the next board meeting anyway. So why don't we just commit to waiting until the next board meeting, and we can determine with the board whether anyone wants to review it and be a part of it before it goes out, or depending on conflict. Sorry, I'm sort of thinking out loud, but I'm thinking through all the timelines.
Sounds good.
And now I'm gonna write notes about doing that.
I'm looking at the time and we have about half an hour left. But I know we've also not taken a break. Did anybody there in
Oh, yeah.
the room eat lunch?
Did
No,
lunch
Can you take a
arrive?
quick break?
Yeah, lunch did arrive, and so, yeah, whatever approach folks want to take, we could take a break for lunch or have lunch here and continue the meeting, or however you guys want to do that, I guess.
A bathroom break would be nice. Yeah.
Good
Should we
idea.
take 5 minutes?
Sounds great.
Sounds good.
My parking's about to expire. So
Oh, you don't use the app?
I've only got, I can't use the app.
Oh, yeah,
Did
okay.
you park in the city hall?
No, is that free?
Well, it's fine.
Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah, it is free.
Yeah.
But I tried to send you.
Where?
I spoke with
So
her
can I-
this morning
the
just about
curriculum
everything that I could do.
out with the
This is
neuro?
her.
The one that's
Familiarizing herself. She has like 30,000 documents going on that are like planning out.
It's very plan oriented. That's a good
Yeah,
job.
and
Yeah,
she-
they're all like beautiful, like laid out.
Yeah,
But yeah,
and I'd love to read through them and also just come back to her about, because she was like, can you read through them and just get back to me, Raj, and anywhere that you might be interested. And it was like, I am interested in anywhere that I can help you, but definitely just familiarizing myself with that content.
Yeah.
And just doing all of that. But that is my plan.
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just ping me if you need anything. We'll be over here.
Think there's enough. like there's plenty there.
I was not gonna take up on lunch now.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, your name? I have not met you yet. No, I'm Caitlin.
Hi,
I'm a
Caitlin.
policy intern here at the mayor's office, so brand new, just started about a month ago.
Oh, well, welcome.
Happy to be here.
Where are you coming from?
New York. Manhattan. So I've been in Manhattan for the past 7 years or so. Finished grad school, got a job.
Yeah, state of Manhattan. I'm
Yeah.
from Westchester. I'm from Bedford,
Okay.
New York.
Okay, so you're familiar with New York lore and all of that. That's very cool. How'd you find your way to Alaska?
After law school, I didn't have any ties to Alaska beforehand. I like really big mountains
Oh, okay.
and I like to be close to the ocean.
Fair.
And
You get
so-
both with that. So.
Yeah. Is this
Cool.
your first time here?
No, I was here briefly in October helping out with various campaigns and stuff like that. And then had an opportunity to come back in December, jumped on it. So it's very different weather. I'm sorry.
It's very dark.
Very dark, very cold, but we're getting through it. We're getting through January. Yes.
How long are you here for?
Through May is the expectation, I think, and really excited. It's been, I think, less than a month since I've been here so far. So still getting my bearings a little bit, just understanding policy initiatives, office structure, all of that. But it's really cool to sit in on just stuff like this and just familiarize myself with like community engagement and the kind of stuff that no one's doing. Yeah, policy conducting. It's cool.
Yeah, it's a
Very
fun
versatile.
perspective,
Yes,
like
very
seeing
different.
how the city works.
Yeah, I've never been involved in the municipality. You're from New York, so you may know like just how New Yorkers respond to the municipality that is Eric Adams. So
Very.
this is very, very different in the best way possible.
I grew up under Giuliani, which was also very, very different.
Very different, I would imagine. But it's cool. It's cool to be here too and just be in the community, get to share like, well, I'm with the mayor's office and just like talk about the excitement that I have for this position
Where
and
is
all
your
of that.
son?
And it's
Is he a
generally.
daycare?
Okay, thanks for the quick break. I think the room is on mute. I don't know if everybody is coming back or we need a few more minutes.
See, I think we have, is it Kevin? Kevin,
Maybe another minute.
yeah.
Okay.
He had to pay for park, he had to go pay his parking.
Better.
So happily, Marie, when she ordered the food, she had everyone hold the onions so that the room doesn't smell. So
Nice.
it's a little, it's a little.
Oh, maybe someone's allergic.
That's what I thought too.
She said it's a little trick she learned when organizing group meetings, you know, and or
Very-
lunches.
Very thoughtful.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah.
I think we're just waiting on a couple more people. Uh, I think everybody's back now.
Yep, looks like Kevin is back.
So just, I think wrapping up the implementation of the programs. Austin and Tamaya are gonna move forward with drafting the pilot part and looking into some things about the conflicts and come forward with what we want to do later. That sound about right? Is there anything else to discuss with the ACE programs that we haven't already covered or questions? Hearing none, the next part on the agenda is about communication. The first part is the op-ed.
Yeah, so we drafted Jessica, the two Jessicas, two of three Jessicas, Jessie Nessett, Jessica Simonson, and Mildred, and I worked on an op-ed that we would like to publish in the ADN. It basically just describes where we are in the process, that we're planning to hire an ED, so kind of giving the public notice and keep an eye on our website and directs people there and talks about how exciting the programs are, basically telling the public that the ACE fund is moving, we're getting going, you're going to see money out there soon. Anything else that other authors wanted to say about it? So I don't know if folks have had a chance to look at it, but I think it would be nice. In the past, we submitted, I think our last implementation team op-ed just was signed the implementation team. So it would be nice if the board is all comfortable with that, to just have it signed the ACE Fund board. But I think if people are not, we could just have people's names on there who are comfortable. Sometimes they only let you do 3 names. And so that's why I was thinking if we just did the board and they will allow that, we could do it. If not, we can list, I'll see what the options are. And Tom Hewitt's normally my contact and he's gone, so I'll explore what we can do.
I thought it was great. It's a good job to everyone who worked on it, Austin and I'm good with the full board for everyone else's.
I agree.
Me too.
I agree as well.
Putting the whole board.
Yeah.
Is everybody in favor of just putting the ACE board on there then? Anybody have any edits or questions? Anybody opposed? Seems like everybody's good with putting the full board on there, Austin. Thank you for helping with that and getting that submitted to the Thinkers Daily.
Definitely. Great. And then other communications, I don't think there's anything we have to talk about now. I was just starting to think through, as obviously we already talked about communicating about the position description and searching for the ED, but I think there are other opportunities for the ACE board to communicate, like when we select a contractor and there's keep an eye out, there will be applications in the community for funding, for ACE funding. So I think we can just keep talking about how we want to do that and how we can all partner. You all are involved in organizations that can share the word too. So just a heads up that I think there are going to be opportunities to talk about the work we're doing. And I'll continue to think about ways we can do that. And because if we're not telling people what we're doing, then they'll assume we're doing nothing, which is not true. I think that's it for that section.
Okay, if there's nothing else for communication, I think the next part is just the member comments. And I think what we started last time was just going around and having some closing comments for each of us. So we want to do that, like, just go through the room first? Then we can go through the people online. I have a
This
hard
is
time
something-
telling who's on the far left.
I think that's Jessica Willoughby, the
Yeah.
municipal attorney.
I
And
know.
then
Khalil, my comment is just that I really appreciate all of the meeting staff's work. I know this is on top of like an infinite amount of other projects. So thanks Jessica, thanks Nolan, and Tamaya, and anyone else I'm missing on teams, and then thanks Austin. Obviously, we wouldn't be where we are today, you know, getting things started without you. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Jesse here. I second that. Thank you all. And Austin, I do so very much appreciate your communication.
thank you.
Kevin here. I'd echo that. And I'd also say thank you to Jessica and Austin for running an effective and quick meeting. We ended like 20 minutes early and it feels like we got a lot done. And it's much easier coming to meetings when we're effective and we get stuff done. So thanks everybody for that.
Yeah, thank you. And also to the committees for working outside our meetings and getting the OPED and everything figured out.
Jessica, maybe we should go to Teams now, I think.
Sure.
Unless Nolan or
no,
Jessica Willoughby wanted to add anything, but
No, thank you guys again for another effective meeting. Austin, thank you for just the communication, the emails, and keeping us abreast of what's happening and how we need to respond. I look forward to finding out more clarity as far as the conflict of interest and what I can do, because I really want to provide input and my expertise to this board, but I know that there's limitations on that. So thank you for being willing to also dig a little bit deeper into that information so that I'll be able to participate even more. So thank you, everyone.
And next I have Branwen.
Hello. I'm kind of thinking similar things to Mildred, as now I'm wondering how am I going to navigate all this and be helpful and give my input without creating a conflict. So, but I'm glad that we're kind of starting to make plans around that, and I look forward to you know having that develop.
And did Tamaya have any comments?
No, nothing for me. Thanks, everybody.
Austin, did you want to say anything before I close this out?
I was just going to say thank you to all of you for your really kind comments. And sometimes you work with groups that aren't very engaged. And, you know, I've seen muni boards or commissions where a bunch of people don't show up and it just feels really different on this board. You guys are awesome and engaged and passionate and hardworking. And it's really fun to work with you. Along those lines, you know, Nolan, Marie, and Tamaya are just sort of jumping in and, like Khalil said, taking this on top of everything that else they have. I mean, Tamaya is doing so many things that we're not even in the loop on. And we have talked a bit about at what point might AHD need some support. You know, for instance, if they're doing all the contract administration for pilot projects, they might need half a staff person or something to do that. So just be aware that AHD has raised that. I think for now they're just jumping in and doing everything they can, but that could be something to think about in future ACE fund budgets as part of that administration. So sorry, that was a little long for closing comments, but thanks everyone.
And I want to echo what Austin said. I think it's really exciting to be working with a group of people who is showing up and speaking up, and being able to share our expertise. So excited to find out, you know, how we can make sure that we can manage all the conflicts of interest and do that really effectively and transparently for the public. And thank you to Austin for continuing to work And for Nolan getting, the contract to really support this board and support this work. We really appreciate that. Is there anything further before I close this out? About 15 minutes early, maybe.
I have a PSA for the people in the room and for anyone who comes and visits City Hall. The parking behind City Hall is complimentary if you're here for City Hall business. So if you're ever coming to a meeting at City Hall, don't park in a reserved spot. But otherwise, it's complimentary. I think it's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. It doesn't work on weekends.
And it's the spots that say visitor, right? That they
You don't see
They
visitor
don't?
explicitly. Well,
I parked in the spot that says, references City Hall visitors. And then it references the payment process, but I also checked with security. And they said,
I have to admit, the signs that they just put up,
are good.
they have a lot of words on them. I haven't put them. They're the tow truck.
Yeah.
They just put those signs up. I don't know what they say.
Thank you for that. I'll stop paying.
That's it.
And you'll stop running out. Order.
Thank
Can
you
I
for the
ask-
clarification on where to park. Yeah, go ahead, Austin.
Sorry, Jessica. Jesse, we didn't talk when we were talking about pilot projects and, potential applicants. We didn't talk about ASD. Do you have any sense for whether ASD might be interested in getting funding for that or?
I do have a sense that ASD would be interested.
Okay.
Whether it's, adding to the complexity.
We're really narrowing the, I'm like looking at the list during the break. I'm like, okay, so we have Trevor and maybe Jesse who might, now we have Trevor. And I haven't even asked him, so we'll see. Anyway.
I can solidify and get back to you.
I mean,
Probably
it's so
not.
hard to know, right? Because you don't even know what the proposal is. Like, you don't know what the parameters are. How do you know? And it's not just you, right? There will be other people in your organization that might. So I completely understand not being sure, but if someone's able to say, "Oh no, we're not doing that. We have way too much already. Way too many plans." So just checking.
Thank you.
Yeah, probably not all of these groups will apply for the pilots, but
Yeah. And that's something we could just like separate the committees. Anyway, I'll think more about it and work with Tamaya and Jessica and we'll figure something out. And I'm going to be out next week, but I'll be back the following week, a couple days into it. And so get back to it, but I'll try to send out draft notes to you guys and anything else that you might need by tomorrow. And I'll submit the op-ed tomorrow.
That sounds great, Austin.
Great. Okay.
I think we officially adjourn at 2 past then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
See y'all soon.
Have a good one.
Folks can feel free to finish their lunches here. If you like.
To my next meeting, beyond. Yeah.